I highly doubt that I am the perfect husband. I have a stressful job, and I know I come home a little cranky sometimes. I may not be the best earner either. I'm certainly not a millionaire, but we're still doing well. We have a nice house, 2 luxury cars, my wife has a closet full of beautiful clothes, and our 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer, has tons of expensive toys. I guess when it really comes down to it, I'm just a simple, hard-working guy who loves his wife and family. Linda and I have been married for almost 12 years now, and for the most part, those years have been heaven on earth. I say for the most part, because in the last couple months or so, something just wasn't adding up between Linda and me. It's hard to say exactly, but she's been acting strange, kind of aloof. On many occasions, for no reason at all, she would pick on things I did or said. It just wasn't like her. I tried to discuss it. I asked if she was mad at me for some unknown reason, but like all women, she just said nothing was wrong, except that she was a little tired or that she was having a bad day. At first, I thought I would just give her some time to work out what was bothering her, but time went on, and her aloof attitude was getting old and downright annoying. Aside from her attitude, as I'm sure any married couple knows, you can't have a problematic relationship with your spouse without it carrying over into the bedroom. I have always tried my best to keep our personal life spontaneous and exciting. I have always been a romantic at heart, so sometimes I would start foreplay by bringing home a dozen roses after work. In the past, such gestures had never prevented me from getting laid later that night, but lately, my acts of love had been met with nothing more than a thank you and a kiss on the cheek. For what they were, she almost thought it was some lame attempt to make up for what I'd done wrong. It had been weeks since Linda had stopped having sex, and my attempts were met with either that she wasn't in the mood or that she had the proverbial headache. On those rare occasions when she gave in to my pleas, she would lay there while I did all the work. Over time, I realized that I was beginning to mentally detach myself from the situation. I would come home, play with my daughter, and give my wife as little attention as possible. Of course, all of this was only making the situation worse. I was desperate, so when I had a minute or two at work, I started going over everything in my head. I remembered when and how it all started. I tried to remember if I had done anything to cause a change in Linda's attitude, but nothing came out. I ran a dozen different scenarios over and over in my head, trying to come up with some sort of cause and effect analysis. The more I thought, the more one unthinkable trigger for Linda's behavior surfaced. I wondered if it was possible. Could my wife be cheating on me? I told myself that, no, she would never do that, but every time I tried to put 22 together, I got 3, me, Linda, and the lover. I tried to convince myself that it just wasn't possible, but you know what they say about curiosity? I've done some reading on what kinds of things to look for. Differences in behavioral patterns, clothing, schedules, and the like. Truth be told, I really haven't noticed Linda wearing any nice clothes or dressing sexier, but I only see her when I get home after work, so who knows how she dresses during the day. I also had no idea what kind of schedule she kept. She's always running here and there for what? Again, who knows? However, when it came to changing her attitude, some of the symptoms seemed awfully familiar. I considered hiring a private investigator, but I had no real evidence. All I had were suspicions and certainly nothing to justify the expense of a private investigator, so I started investigating on my own. I did little things like calling camera and discreetly installed it under the eaves of the garage. I hooked it up to a tape recorder I had hidden on the back shelf behind the paint cans. I wanted to see if any strange cars drove up to the house, but there hadn't been any in 2 weeks. I did see my wife leave a few times and then told me she had been home all day, but she hadn't been gone long enough for anything to have happened unless her boyfriend was a 1-minute miracle. Maybe it was just a small errand that she considered too insignificant to mention. It certainly wasn't proof of an illicit liaison. Time passed, and although I still had absolutely no proof any handkerchiefs, my suspicions grew stronger. Her mood was worsening, and we hadn't made love in a couple weeks. I was already starting to get angry. Our 12th anniversary was approaching, and I saw this as an opportunity. I wanted to get out and have some fun. It had been a long time since Linda and I had last had dinner and dancing. Maybe, just maybe, it would put some spark back into our marriage. I was certainly willing to give it a try. We arranged for Jennifer to spend the night at my parents' house so we could have some real fun with no time constraints. I made reservations at Play Dos, one of Linda's favorite restaurants. She took me under her arm as the maitre d' escorted us to our table, and I hoped some of that old magic would return, but for some reason, it seemed a little strained. We ordered a bottle of wine at dinner, and I could see that Linda was starting to relax. She was starting to act like her old self again. Our conversation was light and playful. After dinner, I could tell my beautiful wife couldn't wait to go out and kick up her heels. I wanted to go to a new dance club that opened a couple months ago, but Linda talked me into going to the same place we usually go. It was a nice place with cozy lighting and a nice cozy dance floor. They catered to a slightly older crowd and played music that a person could actually dance to, so she didn't have to twist my arm too much. Now, I'm not a bad dancer if I do say so myself. In fact, that's one of the things that brought Linda and I together. We both loved to dance. We found a nice private table for two, ordered a couple drinks, took one sip each, and then walked over to show the others that there was more to dancing than two steps. It was just like old times. We were both having a great time. We were a little tired after almost an hour of dancing, so we went back to our table to take a break. I plopped into a chair, but Linda took a sip of wine from her glass without sitting down, then excused herself and went to the ladies' room. I watched with visions of cardinal bliss yet to come as my beautiful couple gracefully swayed their hips with each step she took. When I finally took my eyes off my wife's perfect ass, I realized that I wasn't the only one whose attention she was attracting. Sitting all alone at a corner table on the other side of the dance floor was a very good-looking guy who was watching Linda's every move. For a second, I thought she met his gaze and wondered if they knew each other. When she disappeared into the restroom, I could have sworn the guy was looking right at me with a smug expression on his face. But from this distance, it was hard to tell for sure. The place we were at was strictly a dance club, and I wondered why the guy had come alone, but then figured that, like Linda, his date was probably in the ladies' room. I watched him with the edge of my eye, waiting for my beautiful wife to return. Again, as she passed him on her way back, I was sure I saw them both smiling and making eyes at each other. Suddenly all my suspicions came back. "Darling, could you get me another glass of wine? It's stale," Linda asked me sitting down. I was already feeling awkward, and I didn't particularly like the idea of Linda sitting alone while I waited at the counter while some busy bartender took his time filling my order. I looked around and caught the eye of one of the waitresses. I could have sworn Linda looked disappointed as the young lady approached the table to take our drink order. I just knew the evening was about to take a turn for the worse. I could feel it in my bones. I looked over my shoulder and saw the guy still sitting there unaccompanied. He was definitely alone. "Who's the guy in the corner?" I asked. I caught her off guard. And for a moment, I thought I saw panic in Linda's eyes. However, it didn't take her long to come to her senses. "What guy?" Judging by the awkward tone in her voice, I was sure I was on the right track. "The guy you were making eyes at on the way to the bathroom," I insisted. "Honey, I don't know what you're talking about," she said innocently. I wasn't making eyes at anyone. As soon as our drinks arrived, I saw Linda's eyes flicker quickly over my shoulder. I looked back and saw Mr. Loney walking towards our table. He didn't even glance in my direction. He walked around to where I was sitting and looked directly at Linda. "Can I ask you to dance?" he asked her. I immediately raised my voice. "No. Thank you," I growled. That elicited a response. "I was talking to the lady." He smirked mockingly. "Yes, but the lady is my wife, and I say who she can dance with and who she can't." At that moment, Linda intervened. "Harry," she said, "you're being rude. Do you know this guy?" I could see that the question caught her off guard. That's the one I was talking about. I don't know what's going on with you two, but he just walked up and asked my wife to dance without been looking in my direction. That's not only rude. It's extremely disrespectful. Hey, Mac, Mr. Lone started to say, but I cut him off. You don't mind? I'm talking to my wife, and I sure as hell don't need your input. I turned to Linda and continued, if he'd asked if I'd mind you and him dancing together, I might have agreed, but now, no way in hell. Harry, she said, now with a harshness in her voice. You're being silly. There's nothing going on between this gentleman and me, and, yes, you and I are married, but you don't own me. I'm not your slave, and if I wanna dance with someone, I will. I couldn't believe my wife was talking to me like that. She had never shown me such disrespect. I was seething with anger, and any hopes of having a nice romantic evening with my wife went out the window. However, I was going to try to contain my anger. As I tried to calm down, she continued, honey, I just wanna have a little fun. She said, now in a much sweeter tone, Linda, it's our anniversary. I wanna have fun too. But with you and sitting here watching you dance with someone else is not my idea of fun, especially when I asked you not to dance with him. Now you're right. I don't own you, and I can't stop you from dancing with him, but if you do, you better ask him to take you home because I'll be gone. After 12 years together, I can read Linda like a book. When she looked at my face, her face expressed anger. I was surprised she couldn't see the same in mine. Well, it's rude to make this gentleman stand here while we bicker. So I'm going to dance with him, and we'll talk about it when I get back. She cut her off. The jerk had a triumphant smirk on his face as he held out his hand for her to take. Linda took his hand, stood up, and they walked out onto the dance floor together. I'm pretty sure they didn't even see me leave because I was out the door before they even started dancing. I was already 8 blocks away when my cell phone rang. Where the hell are you? Linda asked in a very remorseful voice. I'm on my way home to pack. Why? Act. There was a pause. What the hell are you talking about? Pack a bag. Where are you going? I don't know yet. All I know is that I'm getting the hell away from you. I said, I've had enough of this. You can't be serious, Harry. It was just a dance, one lousy dance. You're going to throw 12 years of marriage to the wind because of a dance. It had nothing to do with dancing, Linda. Why would you want to stay married to a man you don't love or respect? Honestly, I haven't caught you, but I'm pretty sure you're cheating on me. I suspect with that asshole you just danced with. I saw the way you were looking at each other on your way to the bathroom. When he approached our table, he gave me the same respect a guy gives the husband of a woman he has none. Harry, she said in a softer voice now, I do love you and respect you. I told you there was nothing going on between that guy and me. I would never cheat on you. Why would you even think that? You've gotta be kidding me. We haven't made love in over 2 weeks. When we do, you don't even participate. You just lie there. You've been grumpy and testy for the last 2 months, and don't tell me you respect me because you don't. You proved it tonight. If you're not having an affair, you're faking it pretty damn well. There was nothing but silence on the other end of the wire. Finally, I'm sorry, Harry, I didn't realize. I'm sorry for the way I acted. I'm sorry about tonight. I'm sorry I gave you reason to think I was having an affair. She was quiet for a moment. I think I did look at that guy on the way to the ladies' room. He was a handsome man. I noticed him when we were dancing, and I think we saw each other at the same time, but I'm not having an affair with him. Please, darling. Please just come back and get me, and we'll talk about it. No, like I said, I'm done. I told you if you dance with this guy, you'll have to find your own way home, and I meant it. I'm pulling up to our house right now. I'll be out of here by the time you get home. If you're having an affair, maybe you should just go home with your lover and forget me. Honey, please believe me. I'm not having an affair. Please listen, I'll take a cab, but please just stay there until I get home. Now I recognize the desperation in her voice, different from before. We have to talk this over. Please. I'll be home soon. She pleaded before hanging up. I pulled into our driveway, went upstairs and packed my bag. I left the house exactly 12 minutes later. I wondered if she was really going to take a cab home or if the jerk was going to drop her off, so I drove a block away, turned off my headlights, and waited to see. About 15 minutes later, a yellow cab pulled into the driveway. Linda got out of the car and ran into the house. I saw what I wanted to see and headed for the motel. Almost immediately, my cell phone rang again. I turned it off. I still had no proof of infidelity. But I had very strong suspicions. I was pretty sure that Linda and the guy she was dancing with knew each other. I figured now was as good a time as any for this private investigator. If I wasn't home, maybe she would go to her lover for comfort. The next day, I looked through the yellow pages and found the pie with the best ad. I went down to his office and gave him an advance. After that, I got to work. Tracy, my secretary, told me to call my wife immediately. She said Linda had called 20 times already and something was definitely wrong. I explained that Linda and I were having a problem, and I wasn't going to take her calls. I asked Tracy to make it clear to her the next time she called. I also called the receptionist in the lobby and told her to keep Linda out of the office if she came in. I wanted to give the detective a chance to see what he could come up with. Now it was just a waiting game. A little later that afternoon, I got a call from Andrea, our neighbor. I knew it would be about Linda, but I didn't want to be rude, so I answered the phone. "Harry," she began. "Linda told me what happened last night. She's desperate to apologize, but she says you won't talk to her." "That's right," I said. "I have nothing to talk to her about." I heard a quiet sigh on the other end of the line. "She also said that you suspect her of cheating on you. You don't really believe that, do you?" "I'm afraid I do," I answered. "She's been acting strangely for over 2 months now." That night only confirmed my suspicions. She said all she did was dance with some guy. No, that's not exactly true. I saw them look at each other before he even got to the table. He was extremely rude to me, and Linda took his side and followed right in his footsteps. I warned her of the consequences if she danced with this jerk, but she didn't care. "I'm pretty sure those two are lovers." "Harry, wait. I'm sure you're wrong. I've lived next door to you guys for years. I think I would know if Linda was cheating on you. And I've never seen any evidence of it. I've never seen any strange cars there. I've never seen any strange people. Please." "She knows that dancing with that guy was wrong. She said she got mad because you said she cannot dance with him, but she thought about what you said and realized you were right. Believe me, Harry, I know Linda and she is not cheating on you. She loves you, you know that as well as I do." "I'm not so sure anymore, Andrea. She didn't act out of love that night. That's for sure. Please, Harry. Please just talk to her. You'll never solve anything if you don't talk to her." I knew she was right, of course, but I wanted to buy some time for the private investigator. "Andrea, do me a favor and tell her I'll call her in a couple of weeks. I still have some things to think about." I heard the sigh again. "Okay, Harry," she said, "I'll tell her, but please, please, please call her then. Do you promise me, please?" "I promise." I told her. We said our goodbyes, and that got me thinking again. Andrea and her husband Don were good friends of ours. I couldn't imagine Andrea lying to me. If Linda was cheating on me, it was very discreetly. For the next 2 weeks, I was on pins and needles. I contacted the investigator a couple times, but all he said was that he had nothing to report yet. Finally, he called and asked me to come by his office. My stomach twisted into a knot as I sat down. He pushed a thick paper bag toward me across the desk. My hand trembled as I picked it up. "You can skip all the boring stuff," he said as I opened the first page of his report. "Just get to the end of page 5. I nervously flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for. Proof? After a thorough investigation, this office found no evidence to support the client's suspicions of infidelity on behalf of his spouse. I think my jaw dropped. I wasn't sure how I should respond. Sure. It was good news, great news, but I was so sure she was cheating. Are you sure? I asked, looking back at the man behind the desk. Mr. Fremont, I had a man watching your wife's every move for the last 2 weeks. We watched the house, monitored her phone calls, and followed her every time she went out. We checked her phone records and credit card statements. We found nothing, not the slightest hint that she was having an affair. I was so relieved that I could hardly keep from bursting into tears like a baby in his office. Go home, Mr. Fremont. Go home to your wife and child. I don't see too many happy endings in my business. I thanked him and went back to my motel room. I still needed some time to figure things out. I spent the weekend going over everything in my mind. Monday morning, I called Linda. Her voice was weak and shaky when she answered. Hi. It's me, I said. Are you okay? You don't sound so good. A short pause followed. Harry. Oh, Harry. I'm so sorry, so sorry. I just don't know what I'm gonna do if you don't come back to us. I tried to stay strong for Jennifer, but all I do is cry. I'm so sorry. I guess I was just starting to take you for granted. You were absolutely right. I should have told that guy I was with my husband and backed off. I heard her start to cry again. I didn't show you any respect, and I don't know why, because I do respect you. I love you and I respect you a lot. I swear, Harry, if you give me another chance, I will never make that mistake again. Ever. Linda's request really surprised me. Her attitude was certainly very different from what it had been at the dance club. When I didn't immediately speak up, she drew the wrong conclusion. You're coming back, aren't you? Yes. I answered. And quickly added, but only on a trial basis. I want my wife back, Linda, and I don't mean the woman I've been living with for the last 2 months. I mean, the woman I fell in love with, the woman I married. She's here, Harry. Frankly, she's here waiting for the man she loves. She replied very sincerely. We'll see. After what I've been through, the bad attitude, the lack of any passion in the bedroom, the disrespect, I'm still not convinced, Linda, not yet. I need to go to the motel after work and get my stuff, but I'll be home tonight, I told her. There was silence on her part for a moment before she spoke. I love you, Harry. I'm so sorry for the way I've treated you. I don't want to lose you. I can't say that I still had no reservations. I was still angry, and even with all the evidence to the contrary, I just couldn't shake the feeling that Linda knew that guy in the dance hall. After work, I gathered my clothes and went home. Jennifer came running and almost grabbed me in the doorway. She asked where I had been. I explained that I had been out of town for a while. Obviously, she didn't know anything about our problems. Linda was there too. She put her arms around me and showered me with kisses. I kissed her back passionately. After all, I couldn't deny that I loved my wife. That was 2 years ago, and married life was great again. Linda was once again the woman I married both in and out of the bedroom. A couple months ago, she threw me a surprise birthday party. We had always treated Linda's birthday as a special day in the past, but we didn't start celebrating my birthday until after I got home. Last night was our 14th wedding anniversary. This time, Linda planned the whole evening. When I got home from work, she surprised me with dinner theater tickets to see Man of La Mancha, one of my favorite plays. Then we drove to the lake shore and walked along the beach. The moon had risen and there was a warm breeze blowing off the lake. Thank you for a wonderful anniversary, I said as I wrapped my arms around her and pulled to me. What's this? She asked shyly, feeling the erection in my pants. I think we should go home and do something about it. I agreed, and half an hour later, we were in our bedroom, ripping each other's clothes off. As it turned out, Linda hadn't given up the initiative for the night. To this day, I don't know if she cheated on me or not. I guess I'll never know for sure. What I do know is that I'm glad I decided to come home. Although according to the calendar, spring came a couple weeks early, this was the first day Linda was able to leave the house without her winter coat. Finally, Another Chicago winter made history. Stepping outside, Linda breathed in the fresh scent of morning dew left over from a gentle nighttime April downpour. She smiled as she remembered the warm, safe feeling she had experienced lying in bed in her husband's strong arms, listening to the soft rhythm of the rain. On the way to the car, she noticed beautiful blue wildflowers growing on the lawn. She was delighted by the sight of them. No matter how bad the winter had been, they persevered, striving for a new beginning, a new lease on life each spring. Linda hummed along to the radio in the car as she drove to a small cafe to meet Kathy, a good friend she hadn't seen in a long time. She had a son the same age as Jennifer, Linda's daughter. They had met years ago at a school event, hit it off, and had been good friends ever since. Kathy was the first to arrive and had already taken a small table in the corner by the window. They waved to each other and smiled through the glass as Linda passed by on her way to the front door. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the busy cafe as Linda approached the line of customers waiting to order a cup Colombian heaven. Seeing her friend approaching, Katie stood up. "Hi." Both girls giggled at the same time, hugging each other before taking their seats. "It's been a while." Linda said, "How are you doing?" Kathy's eyes were bright and cheerful as she answered her friend. The girls chatted, reminiscing about old times and laughing at the funny things that happened at some of the school events they attended. They asked each other about their children and both mentioned how fast they were growing up. They had been talking for about an hour when Kathy leaned over the table and lowered her voice. "Linda?" Kathy said in almost a whisper. "Can you keep a secret?" "Yes. Of course," Linda replied, gesturing as if locking her lips with a key. "What's the matter? I shouldn't even be telling you this, but I have to tell someone or I'll burst. I've been, well, sort of dating this guy." Linda quickly lifted her head from her coffee and looked her friend in the eye. "What do you mean by kind of dating this guy? Are you having an affair?" Katie pursed her lips in a mischievous half-smile. "Well, we haven't actually done anything yet, but I'm thinking about it. I know it's inappropriate, but I feel so alive when I'm with him. His name is Cody. Isn't that a beautiful name? I know I shouldn't do this, but I really like this guy, and I'm afraid he'll lose interest if I don't sleep with him. So well, let me ask you this." Linda said, "Are you willing to lose your husband to him?" "Oh, no. Of course not. I'm not talking about marrying the guy, just I'm having a little fling, what they call it, the spice of life," she said with a smile. "I'd make sure Bruce never found out. It would kill him if he found out I was sleeping with someone else." She started taking a sip from her cup. "Besides, Cody is married too. We'll both have to be very careful." Linda had been living with a secret she hadn't told anyone for the past 2 years, and was determined to keep it a secret. She looked at her friend and decided to take a chance. "Kathy, you remember a couple years ago when Harry and I were having problems? He actually left me for a while. Remember?" "Yeah. I know, but I never knew what it was all about. You never talked about it, and I didn't want to pry. I've never told anyone, and you have to promise me you'll never say a word of what I'm about to tell you to a living soul." She waited for a clear signal from her friend before she spoke another word. It took a second, but Katie realized what she was waiting for. Yes, 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 of course, Linda, I promise. If this ever gets out, I'm pretty sure it will ruin my marriage. That's why I haven't told anyone, but well, you need to hear this, Kathy, before you ruin your own marriage." At that moment, a waitress came over with fresh coffee. Linda waited until she finished filling their cups before she began. "I'm probably no different than most other married women. After 12 years of marriage, I felt, well, I don't know, bored. Everything was becoming so routine. It was strange. After all these years, I looked around and asked, what am I doing? Where am I going? Nowhere. I'm stuck here. I have no real life for myself." "Exactly," Katie interjected. I know how you feel, Kat. I'm sure most women go through the same thing. It's not that you don't love your husband. I love Harry with all my heart, but well, Suddenly I felt like it wasn't enough, like something was missing. I think I was really starting to fall into a mild depression. Nothing seemed fun anymore, not even sex. It wasn't really anyone's fault. Hell, Harry was sagging in front of me, especially in the bedroom. I should have been the happiest person in the world, but nothing seemed to help. Even the school events were awful. Linda took a sip of coffee and looked at Kathy, checking to see if her story had gotten through to her. She could see that she had captured her attention, so she continued. Then I met Terry. You were having an affair. Linda confirmed with a slight nod of her head. An emotional affair. Yes. I got wise to it before it became physical. Thank God, she said with a sigh. I was in a little grocery store on Marshall Avenue one day, and I saw him. God, Kathy, he was gorgeous. He had rugged good looks, sand-colored blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes like Robert Redford's. He was tall too. I'm pretty sure he was over 6 feet tall, and even in his clothes, I could see he had a good build. I knew I was staring, but I couldn't bring myself to look away until he caught me, that is. I blushed when he looked at me and smiled. We started flirting with each other. It was exciting and seemed so vicious. I finally came to my senses. I needed to go shopping, so I walked through the grocery department. When I reached out to grab some tomatoes, I ran right into him. He looked at me with his big blue eyes and gorgeous smile and said, "Hi, Katie, I hate to say this, but I felt myself getting wet between my legs." It was so embarrassing. I prayed he couldn't smell the odor coming from me. I know I was blushing again. He held out his hand to me and introduced himself. He immediately noticed my wedding rings, but they didn't seem to deter him from trying to spend time with me. It was very flattering to think that a guy like that might be interested in me. We chatted and joked in the aisles while we both bought what we needed. Then when we got to the checkout line, he gave me his number and said I should invite him to lunch next week. Now Kathy was catching every word in her friend's story. It was so familiar. I almost threw his card away as I was leaving the store. I thought, yeah. Right, I'm going to call you and we're going to have a really hot romantic love affair, and then my husband is going to kill us both. You didn't what? Her fascinated friend asked. I didn't throw away his card. I stuck it in my purse. Hell, all the way home, all I could think about was Terry. Harry came home as I was putting the groceries away. I already felt so guilty that I jumped on him when he tried to help. I think it was some unconscious defense mechanism. Poor Harry just asked if something was wrong. Oh my God, what did you say? Of course, I lied. I told him I was just a little tired from shopping. Truth be told, I was secretly walking on cloud 9. Anyway, Linda continued. I knew I shouldn't have called him. It was wrong. I also knew that because of the way I was feeling, I was very vulnerable. I kept telling myself, no, 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 but I couldn't help myself. I found one of the last pay phones in town and dialed the number on the card he gave me. We agreed to have lunch the next day. With anxious anticipation, Katie waited until her friend took another sip of coffee before continuing. Kat, on the way to the restaurant, my emotions were all over the place. I was terrified and excited at the same time, not to mention horny as hell. At one point, while we were talking, Terry leaned over the table and took my hand. It was almost like being a kid on my first date. I'll tell you that I wanted so badly to get into bed with this guy, but my conscience, or maybe it was just fear. Either way, I just couldn't do it. But that didn't stop Terry. He had already begun his seduction. He started talking about how Harry doesn't know what a wonderful woman he has and doesn't appreciate me. Silly me. I ate it up. I was beginning to resent my own husband. In no time at all, Terry had convinced me that Harry was taking me for granted. God, Linda, that sounds like what I'm going through right now. Kathy said, that's why I'm telling you all this, Kathy. I want you to know what you're getting yourself into. Has this guy you're dating started talking about Bruce yet? No. Not at all. Kathy stopped and thought about the answer she had just given. Well, I mean, not really. He was asking questions, like, does your husband know how lucky he is? Something like that. Uh-huh. And of course, you're starting to wonder about that. Right? Well, Katie, it's happening without you even realizing it. When Harry left me, he said I'd been unhappy with him for over 2 months. I had no idea I was doing it. I was doing the same thing in the bedroom. I just couldn't bring myself to be passionate with a man who I thought was taking me for granted. She saw the light bulb go on in her friend's eyes as she continued her story. Think about it, Kathy. What kind of man has an affair with a married woman? Can you imagine Bruce doing it? Bruce? No. Of course not. He would never do anything like that. Yeah. So why risk your marriage for someone who would? Linda asked. While Kathy pondered what she had just said, Linda continued her story. Anyway, we had lunch again the following week. And it was getting harder and harder to stay faithful to Harry. The third time we had lunch, he almost convinced me to go back to his apartment with him. I could see that he was a little angry at all my excuses, and I knew that if I had another lunch with him, we would end up in bed together. As we were leaving the restaurant after our third lunch date, I mentioned that I needed to buy a new dress because Harry had invited me to our anniversary. I told him that we would probably go to a dance club that we used to go to. Harry talked a lot about how much fun we had there and how we danced the night away. Terry immediately seized the opportunity. He said he would be there to dance with me. I told him he'd better not. After all, it was our anniversary, and my husband might get mad if I danced with someone else. However, Terry acted arrogant and said it would serve Harry as a lesson. It will show Harry that other men want me, and maybe it will wake Harry up and he will appreciate me more. Oh my God. Linda, he really showed up, didn't he? Linda took another sip of coffee. He certainly did. Of course, he did. I noticed him as soon as we walked in. Of course, I didn't dare say anything to him. Up until now, Harry and I had been having a great time. That is until Terry came over and asked me to dance. Oh my God. Katie whispered. Uh-huh. And to make matters worse, he was completely ignoring Harry. In fact, he was downright rude to him. Harry understandably leaned his back against the wall and gave me an ultimatum telling me I couldn't dance with him. Well, you know how stupid I can be sometimes. I got angry and said I would dance with him anyway. Harry told me he wouldn't be there when we got back from the dance floor, but people say things like that all the time. Who believes them? Kathy saw Linda's eyes fill with tears as she continued. When we started dancing, I told Terry that he shouldn't have acted like that in front of Harry. I asked him why he had to be so rude. He said he wanted to put Harry in his place. That made me angry. Of course, Terry kept me very close on the dance floor. By then, however, I was more worried that Harry was watching us and would be even more enraged. In fact, I was so worried that I didn't even realize that the first dance was over, and we were on the second dance. When the dance was over, I told Terry not to ask again. I told him I was going to spend the rest of the evening with my husband. I headed back to the table and saw Terry following me. I asked him what the hell he was doing. He said he wanted to apologize to Harry. When we got back to the table, Harry wasn't there. Terry sat down in his chair and said he would wait with me until he got back. I really don't think he was going to apologize at all. I think he wanted to pull Harry's chain a little more. Why? Katie asked. Why would he want to do that? I thought about it. And I think he figured that since he hadn't managed to get me into bed yet, he would cause problems between Harry and me. I'm sure he was hoping I'd run up to him and cry on his shoulder. I think he thought he would comfort me between the sheets before the night was over. I decided Harry was in the men's room. I told Terry to go back to his table, but he kept stalling. When the waitress came over, he ordered our drinks. It was then that she asked if we wanted to open another tab. I asked what was wrong with the first bill. She said Harry had paid it before he left. Katie, I swear I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, at least my married life. I couldn't believe he just left me there. Linda's face expressed more and more grief as she told her story, and it was similar to Kathy's. She shared her friend's pain, and her own emotions began to show. A lone tear escaped from Kathy's eye and flowed down her cheek. "You don't have to tell me all this, Linda. Look at you. You're crying. Why don't we stop here?" "No, no. I wanna tell you the whole story, Kathy. You need to know the whole story. It's important." "So where was I?" "Oh, yes. I know." I immediately pulled out my cell phone and called Harry. I asked him to come back and get me. That's when he told me that he thought I was having an affair, and he had a good idea it was with Terry. He said he was going to pack up and leave, but he didn't know if he was coming back. Linda picked up a napkin. "God, Kathy, that hit me like a ton of bricks," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. It was like someone had just turned on the lights and everything was suddenly in focus. Harry wasn't taking me for granted. Hell, he did everything he could to try and help. It was me. I was taking him for granted, him and Jennifer, and the life we had built for ourselves. I realized I was risking my entire marriage for some asshole. I asked Harry again to come back and pick me up so we could talk, but he didn't, so I called a cab. "What about Terry? What has he been doing all this time?" Kathy asked. "Oh, he wasn't going to give up, not yet. He said Harry didn't deserve me, and I should go home with him. I told the bastard to drop dead," she reported with a chuckle. "Even after that, he had to try again. He followed me outside to wait for a cab. When the car pulled into the parking lot, he grabbed me and tried to kiss me. I hit him right in the balls with my knee. While he was hunched over in pain, I told him that if he ever tried to contact me again, I would file a sexual harassment suit." Kathy reached out and took her friend's hand while Linda wiped away her tears. "Anyway, when I got home, Harry was gone. I tried to call him, but his cell phone was off. Katie, I was so worried. All I could see was my marriage falling apart right before my eyes. My whole family, everything we've worked for has gone up in smoke. I'll tell you, Kat, I've never been so scared in my life." The next day I tried to call him at work, but he wouldn't talk to me. His secretary told me that he even ordered his secretary not to let me see him if I went there. I was desperate, so I went over and talked to Andrea, my roommate. Harry liked her and her husband, so I thought maybe he would talk to her. Well, he did, but all he said was that he needed time to think about it, and he would call me in a couple weeks. I knew that trying to push him would just work against me, so I decided to give him some space. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life. When Jennifer was around, I tried to stay strong and just told her that Daddy was out of town, but as soon as she wasn't around, I just cried. I thought I had really messed things up. Harry was so angry. I really didn't think he would come back to me, especially if he thought I was cheating on him. Linda was crying now, remembering the pain she had been through. "I'm so sorry," she said to Kathy, "but it's just so hard to talk about even now." She took a deep breath then continued where she had left off. "As I was saying, eventually, Harry called and said he was coming home. Katie, I was so close to losing everything. Believe me, it made me realize what I had and how incredibly lucky I was. In the end, Kathy, love has to trump lust. I love Harry, and he loves me. As far as I'm concerned, there isn't a man in this world worth the risk of that." "Wow," Katie said thoughtfully. "You're right. I don't know what I would do if my husband left me." "Have you ever told Harry the truth? Are you kidding me? As close as I came to losing him, I wasn't going to risk it happening again. Katie, I live in constant fear that someday he'll find out, but since the day he came home, I've tried to be the best wife I could be. I no longer take him or our marriage for granted. Every day I thank my lucky star for what I have, and I show Harry how much I appreciate him with all the passion in my soul. All I can hope for is that it will be enough if he ever finds out." Kathy squeezed Linda's hand encouragingly. "I'm so glad you told me your story. You kept me from making a big mistake, Linda. Thank you." The girls talked for a few more minutes then made tentative plans for their next meeting before saying goodbye. Linda felt good. And knew she had just saved her friend from making a terrible decision. She pulled up to her car just in time to greet her daughter with a kiss and an after-school snack. Damn. She thought to herself. Jennifer is growing up so fast. She'll be 10 years old soon. Where does the time go? When Harry returned from work, Linda greeted her man with hugs and kisses. She had never talked about that painful period of their marriage until that day. Talking to Kathy again reminded her of what a wonderful life she and Harry had built for themselves. Later that night, as Harry lay beside her drifting into blissful sleep, Linda rolled over onto her side and propped herself up on her elbow. She stared at the wrinkles on his face that came from normal aging and remembered when each one had appeared. With an almost imperceptible touch, she outlined the contours of several later ones. Her heart pounded with admiration and love for the man of flesh and bone who lay beside her. Linda leaned over quietly and touched her lips to his, but when their lips met, Harry's lips curved into a wide smile. He wrapped his arms around his beautiful wife and pulled her to him in a passionate kiss. "I thought you were asleep," Linda whispered. "Actually, I was lying here thinking about what to get Jennifer for her birthday," he remarked. "You know what she really wants?" "What?" "A little brother or sister." It wasn't a complete surprise. They had argued about having another child, but never came to any decision. Linda smiled. It looked like her husband had just ended the argument. "Well, her birthday is only 2 months away, dear. Shouldn't we get started?" Harry's smile grew wider. "You read my mind." 2 months later, Jennifer celebrated her 10th day with a big party in the backyard. Mom and Dad invited all her friends, and there was lots of ice cream and cake for everyone. After the party, Linda and Harry surprised their daughter with another expensive toy, and news of a new baby brother.